Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, wherever you are in our wide world. Welcome to another NetHope webinar. My name is Seth Otto, and I'm the Digital Communications Manager here at NetHope and producer of the NetHope webinar series. We're delighted to be joined today by representatives from the Salvation Army, United States Western Territory, and Heller Consulting. They'll be talking with us about building a technology roadmap for fundraising and communication success. Let's go over a bit of housekeeping before we get started. First off, let's make this webinar interactive. Please post your comments and questions in the Zoom chat window for our question and answer discussion during today's webinar. Also, check for a follow-up email that we will send your way shortly after today's webinar. The email will include links to the webinar recording, the slides, and any other resources shared during today's presentation and discussion. And we would really appreciate your feedback. Your opinion matters to us, and we use your responses to our webinar survey to improve this webinar series for you and our broader NetHope community. It also provides our presenters with an opportunity to connect with you if you want to, and to share feedback directly with them. So please do fill out our webinar satisfaction survey after today's session. With all that out of our way, I would like to present today's speakers. Elaine Lofton, who is the Territorial Donor Data Management Director at the Salvation Army USA Western Territory, and Jett Winders, Director of Business Development at Heller Consulting. And by way of introduction, I will now hand this webinar off to Kaya Swift, the Director of Marketing for Heller Consulting, who will lead today's discussion. Take it away, Kaya.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Seth. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Like Seth mentioned, I'm the marketing director at Heller Consulting. Heller Consulting is a boutique nonprofit technology strategy and implementation firm. We are based in California with our staff distributed throughout the United States and Canada. And we are a corporate partner of NetHope. So we're excited to be here today and to talk about the technology roadmap story of the Salvation Army United States Western Territory. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and lead us through the conversation to start. As Seth mentioned, we have with us Elaine Lofton. Elaine, if you could just kick us off by telling us a little bit more about the Salvation Army.
Hi, I'm Elaine Lofton, the Territorial Donor Data Management Director for the Salvation Army Western Territory. And what that title means is essentially I oversee CRM, gift processing, integrations, and constituent data management for certain business sections. The Salvation Army is an international organization that helps more than 25 million Americans annually through a range of social services, including housing, food security, substance use disorder treatment and rehabilitation, disaster services, economic stability, and child development. The international headquarters is in London. We are a chapter-based organization with a national headquarters as well as 4 U.S. territories under those 40 divisions and more than 7,000 locations in the United States. And the Western Territory that I am representing today is headquartered in Southern California. We specifically serve the 13 Western states, including the Marshall Islands and Micronesia and Guam.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elaine. I'm also joined today by my colleague, Jett Winders, who is the Director of Business Development for Heller Consulting. And before I turn it over to Jett, I'll just say, as Seth mentioned at the top of the hour, if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please put them in the chat. We have some time set aside at the end of the hour to go over any of your questions that you have. So I'll be monitoring the chat and be asking those aloud at the end of the hour. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jett.
Thank you so much, Kaya, and I'm thrilled to be here today. I've had the opportunity to work on the front lines of marketing and fundraising directly within nonprofits, been in agencies serving nonprofits for the bulk of my career, and excited to share this story of the work we've been doing with Elaine and the Salvation Army Western Territory. I wanted to share just a little bit before we get to that conversation about some of the things that we're seeing at Heller Consulting in terms of how organizations are thinking about building technology strategies and some of the questions they have to answer, and some of the things we encourage folks to consider as they start to go on their own technology journey and put together these types of technology roadmaps for themselves. So I'll be brief with that so that we can spend most of our time speaking with Elaine and hearing about her firsthand experience and what it means for the organization. So getting started, one of the big questions we see organizations have to tackle as they think through, what a technology strategy looks like for their organization is this question between platforms and products. So for organizations that haven't made changes in a long time, they're usually in this product category where they've adopted a lot of different tools with different departments over time. And some of these products are fantastic. They have highly specialized functionality. They do what they are designed to do. They don't require a lot of administration for them sometimes. But what we find with organizations over time is those can sometimes stop working very well for them. When your needs change, the tool perhaps hasn't changed as much with you. They're also sometimes hard to integrate with one another. And so you're limited in, what tools sort of work together. But we can contrast that with a platform approach, which are platforms like Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics, really, really powerful platforms that have lots of ability to be customized, can meet a lot of different business needs. You benefit from, big investments that these companies are making in the user experience. You also benefit from a big network of tools and apps and vendors that have made integrations and made ecosystems of tools that all work together. But the challenge of these platforms is they can require a lot of new skills within the organization. They require maintenance as you are now more responsible for this technology ecosystem and making sure all of the things work together. And so, this is just one of the lenses that we help organizations think through as they go out to the marketplace and start to architect, what are our systems going to look like? What are the things that we're going to use and what's right for us as an organization? Some of the ways we encourage folks to think about those changes are by developing guiding principles on how they're going to approach technology in the organization. So before we ever get to specific systems and platforms, sometimes it's easier to take a step back and think through at the organization level, what's our relationship with technology? How do we like to adopt and maintain technology? This can be things like, do we hire in-house staff that manages all of this, or do we like to hire experts out in the marketplace whenever we need to make a technology change? And so having some of these, high-level guiding principles about whether we centralize adoption within an IT function in the organization or we encourage departments to vet their own tools and adopt their own tools, having that kind of high-level understanding of how your organization works and how you want to relate to technology can really help you as you move forward in looking at the marketplace to decide, what are the tools that are right for us? Another way we ask our organizations to think about their technology is to map how their data moves throughout the organization. This can help you get away from the specific systems and get away from, the tools and the features and all that, complicated stuff that we talk about with systems. And just go back to basics of what data are we capturing, who is using it within the organization, what do they need to be able to do with it, what decisions do they need to be able to make with that data. And once you have a strong understanding of what you have, where it's living, and who needs to use it, that can be a really valuable lens in which to evaluate solutions against so that you know what you really need to support the work that you do. The last way I like to encourage organizations we work with to think about their technology is that, you really need to center what the impact of those tools are for your organization. There's never a goal just to change systems. That's not the goal at all. You're changing systems or adopting a new tool so that you can do something better, whether that's fundraise more or be more efficient within the organization or serve your constituents better. And so by making sure we're always connecting, what are we trying to accomplish here? What is the impact that a change or a tool will make for our organization? That's the way to make sure everybody understands the importance of what we're trying to do and why we're putting a technology strategy in place. At Heller, we've developed a roadmap methodology to help organizations navigate this process. It really starts with this strategic discovery, and I say it's a strategic discovery because we don't want to just know what the organization is doing today. That's important. We need to know what people need to do in their day-to-day work, but we also want to look forward and understand what the organization needs to be able to accomplish in the future, what changes might be happening, what are going to be the priorities for the organization in the future. And so we do that discovery, capture really what those requirements are, but then we need to prioritize it. Are we going to be fundraising in new and different ways in the future? Are we going to be launching different types of programs? Or is there actually uncertainty and we need the flexibility? And so the flexibility is going to be one of the requirements that we bake into how we assess technology. Going through this process really allows us to determine what the technology needs of the organization are. And it's only then that we actually start to evaluate and select solutions and put names to systems against those specific needs. We've really been privileged to be on this journey with the Salvation Army and with Elaine. And, I always like to say, with these technology roadmaps, that's not the journey itself. Every organization is on some process on this journey already. And I know for the Western Territory, we've done a lot of pre-work and understanding, what data the organization has and where that data lives. So, that's all just really great input to move into that discovery process where we're talking with different departments, understanding, what each group needs, what the functional requirements are, but also what the outcomes the organization is hoping to achieve, then prioritize all of those requirements and ultimately architect what a future state ecosystem would look like and what the requirements of the tools that we're including in that ecosystem are. That's the lens that we're going to be able to look at and put specific names to solutions against. So that's my version of the story, but I really want to hear from Elaine, from her perspective, how they have moved through this process and what really some of the key elements were. So thank you so much for being here. And I'll start with just that big picture type of question, what were the overarching goals for evaluating your CRM at all? And, as you're evaluating it, what impact would a change even have for the organization?
So our overarching goal for evaluating CRM and communication technology started really with the desire to have a 360-degree constituent view across our organization. One of the things about the Salvation Army is not only are we chapter-based and we have multiple locations, but we also have a lot of different business sections. If you look at the services we provide, we have community centers, we have adult rehabilitation centers, we have thrift stores and donors who provide cash for food pantry and food security. All of that data really to date has mostly been siloed in different source systems that operationally work very well for those various business sections. But it's really become more and more apparent to us over the last few years that our CRM, specifically for fundraising, does not allow our staff to communicate with those constituents in a way that fully respects their full relationship with our organization. And so the precipice of this was to find technology tools, CRM, that can integrate or be on platform to allow us to connect to other systems and get that 360-degree view. And in having that, we'd be able to better communicate with our donors, specifically one-on-one. So for face-to-face fundraising, it's useful for a fundraiser to not just know that a donor gave us X amount of dollars over their lifetime and in this year, but also maybe that they're a member at our Croc Center, or that they have a child that went to camp with us. And so, better one-to-one communications, as well as generally better integrated marketing between digital, mail, web, and face-to-face. And really, besides that all-important objective of fully communicating with our constituents, understanding their full relationship with us, we also would like to, of course, streamline operations, eliminate some redundancies and processes and manual tasks. And finally, a really important goal of mine personally that I'm very passionate about is to have our staff's interaction with our CRM drive their strategy and drive their day, rather than have it be a chore of basically data entry to show their work. And so, to log in the morning, go into our CRM, understand what they're going to do for that day, help them decide what they're going to do for that day, as opposed to using CRM for like reactive data entry. Those were our main goals. I think I've sort of implied the change it could have on our organization. More staff time, better fundraiser decisions, better stewardship of our donors, better operational efficiency in terms of change.
No, that's great. I definitely heard the impact that it could have. And I also heard some of the challenges in there too. And I know, when you're in charge of the technology, sometimes that's all we actually hear from folks is the pain points that they have. So, maybe you could just elaborate on some of the challenges that you've been facing with the current technology stack.
Yeah, so we have probably similar to other organizations our size and age, and actually other for-profits who I've talked to who we work with. We have mostly a bunch of on-prem SQL databases. They're siloed, they don't talk, they're resource intensive to run in terms of administration and staff. They're resource intensive to pull reports. Though I do want to say that most of our databases and operational tools work very well for transacting with the operation that they need to support. And so the challenge for me in terms of technology is really the silos and making them talk. And we also have some challenges with process and working with Heller Technology, I should add. They helped us identify our technology, process, and people gaps. So we found that I think people had this concept that technology was maybe the problem, but we also identified there were breakdowns in process where things were just redundant or not really flowing the way that they could. And not so surprisingly, but I really appreciated uncovering most of these issues with people gaps. We have a lot of technology that's available, but we don't have training or documentation or knowledge of that availability. And so we really identified a lot of challenges with people gaps, and we're excited to be able to address those in the future, having discovered them through our discovery sessions with Heller.
That's a great insight, and I'll share a little later in the conversation that's a lens we bring to all technology change, that technology is always part of a bigger project. I mentioned in my introduction, encouraging folks to have, guiding principles as they embark on technology strategy and evaluation. I know these are something you've developed at the Salvation Army Western Territory. Maybe you could describe a little bit and why they're important from your perspective.
Well, it was really insightful to develop guiding principles. We started this project with goals, and those are very important as well. But what the consultants helped us do was identify these sort of overarching principles, department to department, and, sort of the why behind the goals. So the biggest one for us at the Salvation Army, receiving donations from individuals and companies and organizations is always honoring donor intent. It's our number one overarching principle every day. It's how we build every system and every process, is to make sure that we have the ability to review all donor communications coming in with donations, or after donations, and ensure that their intent for the designation of their donation is honored. Besides that, looking more inward through our discovery sessions with end users, obviously we want an intuitive user interface. I think everyone does, but it's very important for us. And it was really a theme that came out over and over through discovery sessions. And we actually, it sounds obvious, but we settled on intuitive rather than simple, because we started thinking we wanted something simple. And as we went more and more through discovery, we realized there were still a lot of requirements and people want a lot of information. So we settled on intuitive, and I think that's really important to distinguish between the two. Mobile friendly really goes hand in hand with the intuitive user interface. We have a lot of people in the field that are not on computers, and for CRM to drive their daily work and strategy, they need to be able to access it on mobile. We want to have holistic communications, going back to our goals and the idea of a 360-degree constituent view. We want to consume information about our donors holistically and communicate back to them as such. Generally, we're looking towards moving towards cloud storage and software as a service, so that we have less demands on internal resources to keep systems up and running. And we want to just really empower all of our staff and users with access to the data they need, where they need it, easily and understandable.
Yeah, that's a great list of principles. And, there's a mix of both how the organization works with technology, like we want to move to cloud-based systems rather than hosting them ourselves, and then what we want out of it, the way it's going to show us information, the ability for it to be intuitive. Our requirements are never simple. So I think you're right on that front. And sometimes it's so much easier to get folks to buy in at that higher level as you kind of move through this process. Very early on in the discovery process, you are then going to be including a lot of different folks too, who are going to be coming from a lot of different perspectives and sharing what they need. So maybe for my next question, what voices are important for you to include in the discovery process?
Yeah, I really thought of this in three groups. Our executive sponsors, right? So the folks that are going to need to allow their staff the time and resources to contribute to any technology changes or just technology maintenance. The end users, the consumers, and being that this was a roadmap for fundraising technology, our subject matter experts were really representatives and groups of representatives for our various lead fundraising channels, like such as digital, mail, corporate, grants, major gifts, gift planning. And then, of course, besides executive sponsors and really the end users and consumers, we also had discovery groups with key stakeholders. So while our IT departments and our finance departments may not be consumers of the technology, they have to either to help us keep it running or are dependent on integrations and such coming out of our fundraising data. And so we made sure to include stakeholders from various business sections in addition to our users and our executive sponsors.
That's great. Including all those different groups is both important because we need the information from them. It also is, a very early change management best practice so that, we can hear from folks and then later tie back any recommendations and any changes back to what people shared and what we heard. Another thing that we do just as part of discovery is make sure we truly understand the current state of the organization's technology. And so we map out what all of those systems look like. And one of the things I think is important here is not just understanding what specific tools are being used, but also what the purpose of using those tools are. Like what does it mean for the organization? What are you able to do with those tools? So then as we go through the process and identify what the needs are, we're able to map out a future state of, what does that collection of tools look like and what we need from each of those tools. So as we look at the future state diagram, we're able to see that, we have a CRM at the center of it, but what are we actually asking of that CRM? And so I think in this case, and we might have that future state diagram next, we can actually see that we've consolidated a few of the systems. We have recommendations that the CRM can actually do more than what the current systems are doing in terms of fundraising and perhaps grant management or planned giving. And so it becomes a really valuable lens that as you look out to the marketplace and when you say CRM, well, what does CRM mean for you? What does that tool mean for the Salvation Army West? And so when you look at the functionality, who has the functionality you need to fill this function within the organization? So maybe I'll ask, having outlined that future state diagram, how is that going to now help you move forward in selecting specific solutions?
Yeah, so it makes me happy just seeing that future state because it was such a fulfilling exercise for us to document current state and to have future state. I like diagrams, so for me it's especially exciting. But it really helped us prioritize in terms of to add to what you just said. I mean, we started this project as it being really a CRM roadmap, and it turned into a technology roadmap, right? What does CRM mean to you? And where does it really end and begin in terms of your overall data management strategy? To have the future state really specifically outlined and diagrammed helps us prioritize, software upgrades in terms of understanding what can come next, what's our time to value. On our future state diagram, we not only identified that we could benefit from a platform-based or integrated product CRM, but that we also would benefit from having a CDP, as well as better integration with our BI tool. And so while we'll get to later in the presentation, I believe, talking about specifically CRM software, we were able to identify some quicker time to value upgrades, such as migrating our BI solution to the cloud and unlocking some of the functionality that would be available with that software by doing so. And And so really just prioritization when you see the whole map and where you're going, biting off little pieces. It can be really overwhelming thinking about upgrading, you know, fundraising technology for an enterprise nonprofit, but having that outline helps you look at chunks and decide where to work next. And then of course, besides just prioritizing, how to bring our fundraising technology closer to meeting our goals, budgeting. So looking at that future state, we don't know, we haven't done a solution selection, but we know what players are, you know, around in what's available for technology for each one of those future state sections. And we can get an idea of how much it may cost in 3 years, 5 years, looking at what parts of the outline could be updated in how many years, and ultimately how much it's going to cost. And for staff planning, you know, we obviously don't want to have huge changes in staff, right? Or for me, it's a priority to not have really big technology changes that would cause a massive reorg or any type of large staff change. We don't want that. We want to keep stable staff, happy staff, and while still having the staff that we have meet our needs to maintain the technology that we're on current state and future state. And so as we create position descriptions for today and look at org charts for today, comparing those to how that staffing will meet our current state as well as future state is really helpful to maintain, you know, stability with staff in terms of knowing where we're going. And I think just having that future state makes everyone feel really confident in, you know, our strategy for updating technology going forward.
Yeah, you talked about a lot of the insights that it was able to give you in terms of, you know, the big changes, but also some potential smaller changes, some way to plan for staffing, so many factors. And, you know, some of those changes require big investments from the organization. Some are maybe smaller, but almost any change requires some amount of organizational buy-in for you to be able to move forward. You need people at different levels kind of on board, understanding and ready to move forward. So, you know, I'll ask, you know, how has this process helped you gain organizational buy-in, you know, throughout this process and then moving forward?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways it's helped us. I'll start with just going back to having that future state diagram. I think it really helps get organizational buy-in from executive leadership and end users in terms of alleviating maybe anticipatory anxiety about where are we going. We have a future state diagram, so we know where we're trying to go, why we're trying to go there. And so it's a lot easier for leadership and users to feel confident going into knowing that we may change some things, we may upgrade some things that will affect them and or cost money, because we have a clear outline of what we're trying to achieve and why. You know, we already talked about stakeholder participation, and through discovery and subject matter experts, you know, that's really huge in terms of buy-in, making sure that everyone's included and, you know, their voices have been heard, even if not every item on their wish list may be met with a future state or with a certain software selection, knowing that they participated in the process of discovery and that their input was considered and put into, you know, requirements and for a future solution. I think, you know, a really big piece of this too, depending on how many voices you have with regard to existing technology in your organization, is just making sure that we had a third party and objective evaluation of our current state. You know, I, in my role, could go to leadership and say, I think we need to upgrade our software. But to really have that objective evaluation, listening to our subject matter experts, to our end users, to those impacted by our existing technology, get that gap analysis of technology, process, and people, look at the gap analysis for technology, and to present that to leadership to show them, you know, we do have some work to do here. And it's not just end user who doesn't like the current system, and it's not just me as, you know, doing administration of the software. There's specific requirements here maybe that aren't being met, and we can show that with that objective gap analysis that was done by Heller through the discovery process. And just, you know, having the full documentation of our discovery, of our requirements, showing that we're organized, we know what we have, so we're not trying to buy forward or look forward without really understanding our current state. All of that was really huge for us, getting organizational buy-in and an agreement that we will work together towards that future state that we created through our roadmap process.
That's great. You mentioned earlier on in our conversation just about so many of the gaps that you found weren't related to technology at all, and that actually there were some gaps in people or processes. And that is a framework that we use here at Heller Consulting whenever we think about any type of operational change. You know, whenever you change anything in one of these categories, these others also change too. So if you were to replace a technology system, the way people do that day-to-day work and the way they communicate with each other, that all changes. And then, you know, the people themselves might need training or new skills, or even just the communication to know how the tool is going to help them do their day-to-day job and why they need it, or perhaps why it doesn't do what they hoped it would do. You know, that can be part of the process too. So, you know, as you look at making any of the technology changes that you mentioned in CRM, CDP, or different integrations with the business intelligence, how do you think those changes will impact your staff and business processes?
So ideally, in terms of business processes and impact on staff, or not ideally, but I feel confident as moving towards our future state that we'll have reduced redundancy in terms of, you know, processes and administrative tasks. You know, we want optimum use of our data, but we also want minimize redundant, anything manual or resource intensive in terms of processing. You know, moving towards more cloud-based and SaaS solutions, I think we'll see increased reliability. With regard to impact on staff, you know, I'd like to see really the impact only be on our end users and have it be positive, where, you know, again, they're able to use our technology to strategize for their day, their week, their year, help them figure out how to meet their goals, who to talk to, who to mail, who to email, right? And really drive strategies so that they can be more successful in their roles. It is an organizational priority for us to minimize really any impact on staff in terms of really changing too much scope of work, responsibility. We really prioritize, you know, as our technology and processes change, you know, finding the people that are best able to internally adapt to those new technologies. And again, just having the roadmap is so useful in future planning and being able to start moving some things around and shuffle some things now before we even are changing anything. So yeah, very excited really for the impact on staff to be, you know, reducing redundancies, driving strategies, helping them be more successful. And, you know, really feeling like the technology we're providing them is an indispensable tool to do their job, and help them achieve their goals.
That's great. I think, just in the question and conversation so far, we've heard lots of little bits of advice on for other folks to consider as they're doing their own evaluation, whether that's internally or with somebody with a partner like Heller. But I'm going to ask it again, to kind of summarize, like, what advice would you have for other folks that are considering taking a look at their technology?
I really think, starting where you are today. So again, not going out and looking at what's available and would it be better, but documenting what you have, and understanding what data do you have, where is it, who needs it, how does it work, doing a gap analysis. Is it really a technology gap, or is it process? Is it people? Is it training? Is it accessibility? And, having on some level, even if you don't have the resources to do a formal roadmap and gap analysis, to really write down, this is what we're using, this is how everything connects, and this is who uses it. And once you have that, to, get formal feedback, be it from your peers, from your leadership, from end users, stakeholders, again, without it needing to be this like as large of a formal process as I've had the privilege to do with Heller, and the Salvation Army has been lucky to have the resources to dedicate the time to having so much documentation on this, but really just to get formal feedback. If you're a database administrator for a fundraising CRM, have a formal meeting with your end users and, write down what their comments are. Get it in writing from them, ask them for some bullet points on how they feel about interacting with technology in their day-to-day work. And then, as looking towards new technology and considering looking at their technology, once you really have on paper or in your mind, right, that what do we have and how do people feel about it? How does it work for them? Really looking at specific things that you can address, with regards to any gaps. So, and getting feedback from several end users, you might uncover a theme or something, consistent throughout that you can address as a training issue, as a technology issue, improve a process. And so, I just really love having our current state diagram almost as much or more even than our future state, and that it really allowed us to see, okay, there's something missing here, and how can we address that? What's something specific and actionable that we can do today or next year that will help us close that gap and better achieve our fundraising goals with the technology we have. I think that having actionable items that I can do today and in a year and in 5 years really helps feel like we're evaluating our technology and moving forward in a way that's truly impactful for our organization to better raise funds to provide services in the immediate and in the future.
Yep. That's just such great insight because, perhaps the end result of a major strategy process might be selecting and implementing a new system. The reality is there's so many things you can be doing today, tomorrow, the next year that are far short of that with your current systems. And so just using that same kind of way of thinking about it to identify what those near term wins are is great. Heller's been around for over 25 years now, and we've really had the privilege of working with a lot of organizations and moving through these types of processes. And, often as a end result, they are making that larger selection over time. That's the big end choice and implementation when those near term changes aren't enough. And we've had the privilege of working with a lot of different organizations, many of which are NetHope members as well. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the next steps? What do you do next? How do you actually go about selecting those solutions? Folks have different procurement processes. They have different ways to gain buy-in and navigate that process. How are you going to move forward?
Well, so for us, we are, besides the smaller changes that I mentioned earlier, like moving our BI to the cloud, updating some integrations, we are currently building a data warehouse. Those are all things that I would consider smaller changes in terms of change management, impact, and budget. But we are going to do a formal solution selection for a CRM software, and where we will be fortunate to use all of the requirements as outlined in the discovery sessions with Heller as an RFP document, essentially. With a little bit of tweaking and some formatting, we'll be able to use that documentation that was created through our roadmap process to provide to software vendors to get their responses for an RFP for a formal CRM solution selection. And we're also fortunate enough to work with Heller for our solution selection project and get help with that with regards to scoring and vendor coordination. Being a large organization with so many stakeholders, we will have all of our subject matter experts and larger stakeholders reviewing RFP responses and doing scoring. And so we'll be fortunate enough to have help with aggregating some of that scoring and help selecting our future solution with regards to software that's already included in our future state diagram. So really excited.
Well, I'm excited to see where things go, and thank you for answering my questions. If folks listening in are tired of my questions, I think this is the time Kaya gets to share with us some of the questions folks may have asked during this conversation.
Really wonderful conversation, and thank you, Elaine, for sharing the story of you and your team and all of the work that you've been doing. And like Seth has been saying in the chat, if there's anything that you would like to ask Elaine or Jett, please pop that in the chat. I'll kick things off, and Jett, I'll ask you kind of a common question that we often get around these technology roadmap projects, which is, what do you do if you're looking to make system improvements, but you aren't necessarily in the position right now to change your major systems?
Yeah, I think Elaine hit some of that on the head, that you can still go through this type of evaluation process, but you're just defining the parameters of what your, constraints are. And constraint might not even be the right word, but, we're not looking to make wholesale changes to our technology. Elaine's not looking to make wholesale changes to her staff. This is just a guide that then when we look at the recommendations, we can say, great, what can we do with our current systems, or what can we do with an extra app or a small integration to solve those pain points. And when you do the big project, I think lots of those little things come out, but you don't have to have that conversation at that scale. You can have it focused on, what are the changes we can make with the technology and tools we have now.
And another one, at one point, Elaine, you said that it started out as a CRM roadmap and then became a technology roadmap, which is something that we've seen happen before. So I guess a question for both of you is just around, does this road mapping process work, Jett, for different types of systems, not just a CRM? How have we seen that played out with other organizations? And then Elaine, for you, what have you seen as the benefit of sort of expanding it out as you've gone through the process?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, just to get us started, I'll say, CRM, I think it's become one of these terms that we use, and it might mean different things to different people. But, the big picture is we want to manage our data better. We want to know what our constituents are up to. And it's often taking a collection of tools to do that. There's no just one tool that we all use to manage our work. And so, this process can focus on a single system. We've worked with organizations where we're looking at all their enterprise solutions. You do have to, in your own mind for your organization, start to think about what the breadth of this conversation should be, what's up for discussion. Some orgs are ready to tackle everything. Some we're looking at one department, and that's fine. The process can kind of grow or expand based on really, where the need is and where you want to take the conversation at your org.
I would say specific to our project, it wasn't so much the benefit of it becoming a technology roadmap. It really was essential, being that our first guiding principle was to have a 360, our first goal and our guiding principle was to have a 360-degree constituent view. We just aren't really willing to look at technology anymore that's going to be siloed and that doesn't have, integrations that we are either native or that we can facilitate with some programming. And so, we had to at least look at that as maybe, the core application that we wanted to improve for end users. And at the very least, look at all the tendrils coming out of what it touched and what was impacted, which we found we integrate with our finance software, we integrate with some of our community center software. And so at the very least, it's sort of, if you think of that as like the center of what we're trying to strategize for improvement. For our organization, we had to at least include the offshoots of that particular system. And the advantage of such was gaining some insight for those offshoots, looking at BI and a CDP, and finding those sort of quicker wins, even that are easier to implement sooner than something like a CRM upgrade.
Absolutely. There was a question that came in the chat for both of you. It says, it sounded like a useful approach, visiting your future state early and often with your end users along the way. Could you speak more about this process and any potential pitfalls that were identified and avoided?
Potential pitfalls that were identified and avoided. Well, really, we are going to do a solution and selection that may be inclusive, but a large theme for us was that really we probably should be on a platform. In meeting with, if we had really done our discovery in a silo of CRM and fundraising staff, that's not something that would have been identified because we would have been so focused on user interface, which is all very important, an intuitive user interface and strategy and, maybe what's available in that system. But by including those stakeholders who aren't end users, as well as letting our future state diagram have those tendrils out of CRM, we got a lot of feedback from, for instance, IT, finance, and other business sections about the way our data transacts. And we're fortunate enough to have a lot of integrations, but they're really resource intensive in terms of programmers and systems and even processing on our servers. And so, I think, having that future state really points us probably towards the platform, as opposed to just looking at platforms and products specific to one application.
Yeah, I'll just add on to avoiding pitfalls is, including those voices from different departments, IT leadership early in the process. And sometimes I feel like folks, they think, oh, if we keep discovery more narrow, it'll have a more focused outcome. But, in our projects, we're really good at making sure we keep our eyes on what the goal is. But by hearing the concerns and the interest of all of the voices, we're able to say, this is how that future state actually speaks to everything. And if there is a potential conflict, actually why we're not going in the direction that we heard from one group, but we can be clear about why that is. When that doesn't happen, sometimes you get to that future state, people go, well, that won't work for us. And we never had a say. And you can avoid that by including those voices early on.
Thank you both. Elaine, one more question for you is, any advice for choosing a consulting partner?
Yeah, so, well, really candidly, we started, our first project with Heller Consulting was to do a data mapping project for our data warehouse. And the Salvation Army, it's really important to us that we do our due diligence and we're good stewards of funds. So I did get estimates from 3 consulting partners, to make sure that we were getting a competitive rate in terms of being good stewards. But what was really important to me, besides cost, was also looking at the scope of work, and and not necessarily even us providing the scope of work, but I had the opportunity to discuss the project with the different consulting firms, and just sort of getting their vision of the project back in writing based on what we had discussed, and the detail and the scope of work, understanding the requirements for our project. That was really how we made our decision, was off of the detail and the quality of the scope of work that was provided back to us by Heller, and feeling confident, going into the project, that it would be handled, really well, and with the detail and the care that we needed.
Well, thank you for that, Elaine.
All right, well, I know we are here at the top of the hour, so I'll just wrap up and say quickly that if you are interested in learning more about technology roadmaps or technology strategy, we do have a webpage that I put together specifically for this webinar that kind of compiles a lot of resources we have about technology strategy and implementation next steps. I will put that here in the chat if I can. Or Seth, I'm going to put it to you if you wouldn't mind putting it in there. But I encourage you to go check those out and read some more. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Jett and Elaine.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to NetHope for hosting us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Kaya, for hosting today's session with us. You make it look very easy. I'd like to give a special shout out and many thanks to Heller Consulting, because Heller's been an excellent partner to NetHope for years now. Thank you to our audience for joining us here today and for engaging with us about this important topic. Thank you to Ms. Lofton, Mr. Winters, for your excellent presentation, your conversation, and for bringing this important story to the wider NetHope community. And everyone, remember, this webinar series needs your voice. You can help us improve this vital resource for the NetHope community by filling out our webinar survey. Links are in the chat, and they will also be in our follow-up email and on the webinar landing page at nethope.org. So check for that follow-up email coming your way in the next few hours for links to the webinar recording, slides, and other resources shared during today's presentation and discussion, including that great webpage that Kaya put together. And on behalf of our presenters and NetHope, we wish you a great rest of your day wherever you are in our wide world. And thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.